When I was 22 years old, I was a seasonal firefighter with no wife, no kids, and not much of a social life. I lived a lone wolf lifestyle. I had a habit of wanting to be noticed. So I would jump from bar to bar, not to pick up girls or get drunk, but just to chat with like-minded people or hear war stories from veterans. One night, at a bar about 10 minutes from my house, I was sitting there drinking a Jack and Coke and watching a 49ers game when I heard someone yell, "Fuck Kaepernick!" I looked over and said, "He doesn't even play for them anymore." The man replied, "I know, but it's fun to say," and kept ranting about Kaepernick. I asked him what he had against him. He said Kaepernick disowned his family and acted like they didn't give him a good life. I agreed that Kaepernick seemed to have had a better life than most. Eventually, I learned this man's name. Let's call him Rob. Rob was an 82-year-old veteran who had recently retired. His wife had passed away from cancer 5 years before I met him, and he had 2 sons. Rob and I always had good conversations whenever we saw each other. One day, Rob asked me to pick up a friend of his from an appointment. I asked why, and he said that even though we didn't know each other well, his car was being serviced and he wouldn't be able to pick him up. I hesitantly agreed. On the day of the appointment, I arrived and met Rob's friend. He was mentally delayed, handicapped. After I picked him up, I called Rob and asked where he needed to go. Rob told me to bring him to the shop where his car was being serviced. While driving, Rob's friend pointed at an ice cream shop and said, "Mom's favorite ice cream. Can we get some?" I agreed because it sounded good to me too. When we arrived at the shop, Rob's friend said, "I'm here, Dad." Rob said, "You are, and you got ice cream too." Then Rob pulled me aside and thanked me. He told me he had a 3rd son, his oldest, age 58, who had special needs. His 2 younger sons didn't want to help when he needed time to himself. I told him it was my pleasure and that I enjoyed his son's company. When I was 24, Rob called and asked if we could meet. We met at an undisclosed location. Rob told me his health was declining and that he needed someone to be his oldest son's advocate when he passed away. I asked about his other 2 sons. He said the youngest was a drug addict who refused help and had no sense of responsibility. The middle son had been abusive toward the oldest and was only interested in inheritance. Rob said he didn't believe in lawyers and had no will. He told me he was going to liquidate all his assets and convert everything into gold and silver. He planned to rent a small apartment and live simply. He said he was leaving me responsible for making sure his oldest son was cared for and that the care home would be paid. He gave me 2 keys in an envelope, one for a deposit box and one for his storage unit, and asked me to use them only in the event of his death. I promised him I would. In June of 2024, I saw an obituary stating that Rob's oldest son had passed away from a stroke. I immediately called Rob. When the phone was answered, I said, "I'm sorry for your loss," and the voice replied, "Who is this?" I avoided giving my name and said I was a drinking buddy of Rob's. The person said Rob was dead too, that he was a deadbeat father who left nothing for his kids, and that his only purpose was to be listed as next of kin to identify the body. Apparently, Rob had fallen asleep and died from carbon monoxide poisoning, and his landlord found him. A few weeks later, I opened the envelope. Inside were the locations of his deposit box and storage unit. I went to the deposit box labeled D19. I thought I wouldn't get access, but I did after showing his obituary and the key. When I opened the box, there was a letter that said, "You have been a good friend, and this should cover all expenses." My eyes widened at the sight of gold and silver. It was about $600,000 worth. I didn't know what to do with it, so I've been hiding my newfound fortune. Recently, Rob's youngest son died of an overdose as well. My question is, should I at least give Rob's last surviving son the storage unit?